15 years ago, on land he bought when it was nothing but empty fields and pine trees. Then 2 police cars pulled up, behind them a white Mercedes, and a woman with her arms crossed like she'd just caught a war criminal. Maria Cooper, self-appointed HOA president. 14 emails in 3 weeks, and 1 cold demand to the officers. This man is trespassing. Remove him. The problem? She was standing on land he bought and paid for. Her house? Built on his property. Every house in that neighborhood? Sitting on a 99-year lease, with his name on the deed. She had no idea. This is a story about fake authority, quiet patience, and what happens when a neighborhood Karen picks a fight with the wrong farmer. If you enjoy stories about justice and want to follow this one to the end, hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Now, let's begin. I want you to picture this, a Saturday morning in late September, the kind of morning where the air smells like pine needles and wet soil, and the only sound is birds arguing in the trees. I was on my knees by the fence line, replacing a rotted post, the same fence I built when I first bought this land 15 years ago. My hands were covered in dirt. My coffee was getting cold on the porch railing. And for about 20 minutes, I had completely forgotten that the rest of the world existed. That's why I come out here. 47 acres of nothing but trees, sky, and silence. No phone calls, no tenant complaints, no spreadsheets, just me and the land. Then I heard the gravel crunch. 2 vehicles, moving slowly. The kind of slow that means someone's looking for something. Or someone. I stood up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and watched 2 police cruisers roll down the dirt path toward my cabin. Behind them, like a parade float nobody asked for, was a white Mercedes SUV. I didn't recognize the car, but I had a pretty good guess who was inside. For the past 3 weeks, I'd been receiving emails, 14 of them. Each one is more aggressive than the last. Each one was from someone named Maria Cooper, who called herself the president of Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. Each one demanding that I comply immediately with rules I'd never agreed to, for an organization I'd never joined, on property I'd owned since before her neighborhood existed. The officers stepped out first. One was young, couldn't have been more than 25, and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The other was older, Latino, with a tired expression that told me this wasn't his first ridiculous call of the day. His name tag said Rodriguez. He walked toward me with his hands visible, non-threatening, almost apologetic. "Good morning, sir," he said. "We received a report about illegal construction and possible trespassing on private property. Are you the owner of this cabin?" I nodded. "I am. Built it myself in 2010. You want to see the deed?" Rodriguez glanced back at the Mercedes. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Maria Cooper. I'd never met her in person before, but I knew it was her immediately. Blonde hair pulled back tight, sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown, arms crossed, phone already raised, recording everything. You know the type who speaks to managers, the type who leaves 1-star reviews because the waiter smiled incorrectly, the type who genuinely believes the universe organized itself around her convenience, and anyone who disrupts that order is a threat to civilization itself. She marched toward us like she owned the place, which, I should mention, she absolutely did not. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," she said, not even looking at me. As I explained on the phone, this structure is in violation of six HOA regulations. It doesn't match the community aesthetic. There's no approved landscaping plan. And this man, she finally turned to me, has been seen here multiple weekends without registering as a resident. I let her finish. I've learned over the years that some people need to empty themselves before they can hear anything. So I waited. Rodriguez looked at me. "Sir, do you have documentation proving ownership?" I did. I walked to the cabin, grabbed the folder I keep in the top drawer, deed, survey map, tax records, and handed it over. Rodriguez flipped through, nodded, and handed it back. "This all looks in order. Mr. Reed, you're listed as the owner since 2009. Maria's face tightened. "That doesn't matter. This property is within Pinewood Estates boundaries. Everyone within the boundary is subject to HOA rules. He hasn't paid dues. He hasn't submitted architectural approval. He's in violation." Here's the thing. I could have ended it right there. I could have explained that Pinewood Estates was built on land leased from me, that the boundary she kept talking about existed only because I allowed a developer to build on my property 2 decades ago, that every single house in her precious neighborhood, including hers, sits on ground I own, that her HOA has exactly 0 authority over me, because I'm not a tenant, I'm the landlord. But I didn't say any of that. Why? Because I wanted to see how far she'd go. There's an old saying my father used to tell me, give a person enough rope and they'll hang themselves. I never liked that saying. It felt cruel. But standing there, watching Maria Cooper lecture a police officer about community standards while pointing at a cabin that predates her entire subdivision, I started to understand what he meant. Rodriguez turned to Maria. Ma'am, the property records are clear. Mr. Reed owns this parcel. Unless you have documentation showing he's bound by your HOA covenants, there's nothing we can do here. Maria's jaw tightened. This isn't over, she said. I'll be contacting our attorney, and the county, and the state housing board if I have to. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. You think you can just ignore the rules because you were here first? That's not how communities work, Mr. Reed. We have standards, and you will comply. She turned, walked back to her Mercedes, and drove off in a cloud of dust and self-righteousness. Rodriguez sighed. Sorry about that, sir. We've gotten a few calls from that address. Have a good day. And just like that, they were gone. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the engines fade. The birds started up again. The wind moved through the pines. Everything was exactly as it had been 20 minutes ago, except now I had a decision to make. I could ignore Maria Cooper, let her send her angry emails and empty threats. Eventually, she'd get bored or move on to harassing someone else. That was option A. Option B was different. Option B meant pulling out the original lease agreement, calling my lawyer, and reminding Maria Cooper and everyone else in Pinewood Estates exactly who owns the ground beneath their feet. I picked up my cold coffee and took a sip. It tasted bitter, but I smiled anyway. Because Maria Cooper had just declared war on a man she knew nothing about. And I was curious, genuinely curious, to see what she'd do next. The emails started politely. Reminder, compliance required. Community standards, architectural guidelines. We kindly request. By the 5th one, the kindness was gone. Final warning. Then, violation notice. Then, legal action pending. Each message CC'd something called the Pinewood Estates Board of Directors, which seemed to consist of Maria, her husband Kevin, and 3 neighbors whose signatures looked suspiciously identical. The subject lines got louder, the deadlines got shorter, the threats got more specific. But here's the thing, Maria Cooper didn't understand. I've been dealing with contracts my whole life. Land leases, equipment purchases, crop futures. I know what real legal pressure looks like. And this was a woman with a keyboard and too much free time, pretending authority she never had. The emails were annoying but manageable. What I couldn't ignore was the letter that arrived in week 2. Thick envelope, embossed letterhead. Cooper and Associates, attorneys at law. 3 pages of dense legal language accusing me of willful non-compliance, depreciation of community property values, and, my personal favorite, aesthetic terrorism, for owning a cabin. The letter demanded I demolish the structure or pay $25,000 within 30 days. Signed by Jonathan R. Cooper, Esquire. Same last name as Maria. Interesting coincidence. I spent 20 minutes on the State Bar website. Jonathan R. Cooper did not exist. Cooper and Associates did not exist. Maria Cooper had created a fake law firm, written a fake legal threat, and mailed it to me in a premium envelope she probably bought at an office supply store. That's not aggressive HOA management. That's a felony. I'll be honest, that night I didn't sleep well. Not because I was scared of Maria or her imaginary lawyers, but because I was angry. There's something uniquely violating about someone trying to take what's yours through paperwork and intimidation. It's not like being robbed. That's brutal, but honest. This was someone betting I'd be too confused or too tired to fight back, that I'd write a check to make it stop. And the worst part? I knew it probably worked on other people. The final piece arrived the following weekend. A yellow envelope in my mailbox. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Inside, fine notice. Violation. unauthorized construction, failure to submit architectural plans, and non-payment of HOA dues. Fine amount, $1,500. Payment due within 30 days. And at the bottom, in bold red letters, false to pay will result in a lien being placed on your property. A lien. She was threatening to put a lien on my property. From an HOA that has no bank account, no tax ID, and no legal standing whatsoever. I stood in the fading light, holding that yellow paper, and felt something shift. That moment when annoyance turns into something colder, something more patient. You're probably wondering, why not call the police, report the fake lawyer letter, sue for harassment? Fair questions. But here's my answer. I wanted to know why. Why was Maria Cooper willing to commit multiple felonies just to get rid of a cabin that had been there for 15 years without bothering anyone? There had to be something else. And I've learned that the best way to understand someone's true motives is to let them keep revealing themselves. So I didn't respond, not to any of it. Instead, I started paying attention. I drove through Pinewood Estates slowly, like a buyer scouting properties. Maria's house, the biggest on the block. HOA approved signs in some yards, not others. Neighbors who glanced at my truck with something that looked less like suspicion and more like sympathy. And one detail that would turn out to be very important. Every month, on the 1st, Maria walked door to door with a clipboard. People handed her checks. Checks made out to Pinewood Estates HOA, an organization that doesn't legally exist. Where was that money going? That Sunday night, driving back to my farm, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight Maria Cooper with lawyers, not yet. I was going to find out exactly what she was hiding. And then, I was going to let everyone else find out too. The following Saturday, I walked through Pinewood Estates as I belonged there. Not sneaking, just a man taking a morning stroll. I wanted to see it up close, the houses, the yards, the people. And maybe I wanted someone to talk to me, someone who wasn't Maria Cooper. I found her 3 streets in, Helen Garcia, 67 years old, silver hair and a loose bun, kneeling in her front garden with dirt-stained gloves. She looked up as I passed, and instead of the suspicious glare I'd gotten from others, she smiled. "You're the cabin man, aren't you?" I stopped. That's one way to put it. She laughed, real, not polite. "Maria's been telling everyone you're a squatter, a threat to property values." She pulled off her gloves. "I taught civics for 30 years. I know when someone's full of it." Helen was the only person in Pinewood Estates who refused to sign Maria's HOA document. "She came to my door 2 years ago," Helen said, handing me iced tea on her back patio. "Said it was mandatory, said I'd have problems with the county if I didn't sign." I asked what kind of problems. She couldn't answer. Helen shook her head. "That woman's been playing pretend government ever since." I asked about Maria's background. Helen's expression shifted. "Property manager in Las Vegas, got fired. Harassment complaints, maybe worse. Her husband, Kevin, let it slip at a barbecue once. Looked like he wanted to disappear." That was enough. Property manager, fired for harassment, now threatening people with fake lawyers and liens. I thanked Helen for the tea. She grabbed my arm before I left. "Be careful. Maria doesn't fight fair." I nodded. Neither do I. That afternoon, I drove to the county recorder's office. The plat maps, the deed transfers, the original documentation. The clerk found what I needed in 20 minutes. Every deed in Pinewood Estates contained a clause in small print, subject to ground lease recorded as document number 2009-47832, my lease agreement. Every homeowner had technically agreed to it when they bought their house. They just didn't know it. And this is where I made a mistake. I was so excited that I pulled out my phone and called Maria Cooper. She didn't answer. But 2 hours later, the neighborhood social media group had a new post. "Warning, the man from the illegal cabin has been seen researching residents' personal information. He may be a stalker. Do not engage. Maria Cooper, HOA president." I'd tipped my hand, given her ammunition. Stupid. I drove back to the cabin that night, poured a whiskey, sat on the porch watching stars through the pines. Then I remembered something. A fireproof safe in the back closet, left by the previous owner. I'd never opened it. The combination was on a piece of tape underneath. His wedding anniversary. I punched in the numbers. Inside, old documents. The original survey from 1962. Letters to the county planning department. And at the bottom, the master copy of the ground lease. I flipped through it, standard language, boring, technical. But on page 7, someone had highlighted a paragraph in faded yellow marker. Clause 7.3. I read it once, then again. My hands were shaking. You want to know what it said? So did I. But at 2 in the morning, with legal terminology I hadn't touched in years, I needed a professional. James Rogers, real estate attorney. Helen had mentioned his name. I left a message, Monday morning, 9 a.m. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because the problem was solved, but because somewhere in that safe, buried under 15 years of dust, was the answer to a question Maria Cooper never thought to ask. James Rogers had the kind of office that told you everything you needed to know about him before he said a word. Small, no receptionist, wood-paneled walls covered with framed certificates and old photographs of land surveys. A desk buried under stacks of paper that somehow looked organized. He was 60 years old, maybe 65, with gray hair cropped short and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. When I walked in Monday morning at 9 sharp, he didn't stand up, just pointed at the chair across from him and said, "You're the farmer Helen called about. Sit down, show me what you've got." No handshake, no small talk. I liked him immediately. I placed everything on his desk. The original ground lease from 2009, the deed to my cabin, the plat map from the county recorder's office, Maria's HOA document with the 8 signatures, the fake lawyer letter from Cooper & Associates, the fine notice threatening a lien, and finally, the master copy of the lease agreement with clause 7.3, highlighted in faded yellow marker. James picked up each document one by one, reading slowly. He didn't speak, didn't react, just occasional nods or slight frowns as he turned pages. 10 minutes passed, 15. I sat there watching him, trying to read something, anything, in his expression. Nothing. Then he got to clause 7.3. He read it once, paused, read it again. Then he took off his glasses, set them on the desk, and looked at me for a long moment without saying anything. 30 seconds of complete silence. I counted. Finally, he spoke. "Mr. Reed, do you understand what this ground lease means?" I told him I thought I did, but I wanted to hear it from a professional. He nodded slowly. "When Westbrook Properties built Pinewood Estates, they didn't buy your land. They leased it, 99 years. The houses they built belonged to the people who purchased them. The structures, the improvements, everything above ground. But the land itself?" He tapped the lease agreement. "The land never changed hands. It's still yours." I said I understood that part. James leaned forward. "Do you understand what that means for Mrs. Cooper?" I told him to explain it like I was 5 years old. He almost smiled. "It means the woman who called the police to report you for trespassing, the woman threatening to put a lien on your property, is currently living in a house built on ground that you own. She pays rent to you, or rather, she should be paying rent to you, through the terms of the original lease." He paused. "Does she know this?" I shook my head. "I don't think anyone in that neighborhood knows." Let me pause here, because I need you to understand what I was feeling in that moment. For 3 weeks, Maria Cooper had treated me like a criminal, like an intruder, like someone who didn't belong. She'd sent fake legal threats. She'd called the police. She'd posted warnings about me on social media. And the whole time, she was living on my land, paying nothing, demanding everything. The woman who tried to put a lien on my property, I could put her out of her house, legally, rightfully, with a single document. Do you have any idea how that feels? James wasn't finished. He pulled out his laptop and spent the next 20 minutes doing what I couldn't do from home, accessing legal databases, cross-referencing business registrations, checking banking records through some attorney portal I'd never heard of. When he turned the screen toward me, I understood why Helen had recommended him. Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association, he said, pointing at a search result. No state registration, no tax ID number, no registered agent, no official bank account. He clicked to another window. But Mrs. Cooper has been collecting monthly fees from at least 8 households, $300 per month per household. That's $2,400 a month, nearly $29,000 a year, for 3 years. He looked at me over his glasses. Where do you think that money went? I didn't have to guess. James pulled up one more document, a complaint filed with the Nevada Real Estate Division 4 years ago. Maria Cooper, former property manager, terminated for unauthorized collection of fees and misrepresentation of management authority. The complaint had been settled out of court. She'd paid a fine and agreed to leave the industry. Then she'd moved here, bought a house, and started doing the same thing, except this time, she'd created her own fake organization to hide behind. "This isn't aggressive HOA management," James said quietly. "This is fraud, wire fraud specifically, since the payments were electronic. That's a federal offense. And the fake attorney letter?" He held up the Cooper and Associates letterhead. "Impersonating a lawyer, also a crime. In most states, a felony." I asked him about Clause 7.3. What exactly did it say? What could I do with it? James picked up the highlighted page and read it aloud. "The landowner reserves the right to terminate any lease or sublease agreement if the lessee, sublessee, or any resident occupying property within the leased area engages in conduct that materially interferes with the landowner's use and enjoyment of the property, including but not limited to harassment, obstruction of access, filing of false claims, or misrepresentation of ownership rights." He set the paper down. "Mrs. Cooper has done all four: harassment, the emails, the fake legal threats, the police calls; obstruction, trying to prevent you from accessing your own cabin; false claims, the lien threat, the fine notice; misrepresentation, telling everyone she has authority she doesn't have." He folded his hands. "You have grounds to terminate her lease. Today, if you want. She'd have 30 days to vacate." James watched me for a long moment. Then he asked the question I'd been asking myself since I found that safe. "Mr. Reed, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've seen a lot of people get power they didn't earn and use it to hurt others. I've also seen people with legitimate power use it for revenge instead of justice." He leaned back in his chair. "You have a weapon in your hands. A legal, documented, perfectly valid weapon. What do you want to do with it?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know what I wanted, but because I wasn't sure it was the right thing. Terminating Maria's lease would solve my problem, but it would also make me look like the aggressor. The rich farmer is kicking a family out of their home. Maria would spin it that way. She'd play the victim. And the other residents, the ones she'd been scamming for 3 years, would never know the truth. They'd just see a bully with money and lawyers. I told James I needed time. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. "Take the weekend," he said, "but don't take too long. People like Mrs. Cooper, they escalate. Whatever she's planning next, it'll be bigger than fake letters and fine notices." He handed me back my documents, neatly organized in a folder. "And Mr. Reed, whatever you decide, document everything. Every email, every interaction, every witness. When this goes to court, and it will go to court, you'll want a paper trail so clean it squeaks." I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. 45 minutes of empty highway, thinking about power and patience and what my father used to say about rope. When I got back to the farm, I checked my email. There was a new message from the Pinewood Estates community group. Subject line: "Mandatory community meeting, Saturday, 10 a.m. The body was short. "Fellow residents, it's time we address the ongoing threat to our community. The individual occupying the illegal structure at Lot 47 has refused to comply with our requests and has been seen conducting surveillance on our neighborhood. I am calling a formal vote to require compliance or pursue legal action. Your attendance is mandatory. Maria Cooper, HOA President." She was organizing a vote to force me out, using an authority she invented in an organization that doesn't exist, on property she doesn't own. And she'd scheduled it for Saturday, 6 days away. 6 days to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The kind who strikes first and asks questions later, or the kind who waits for the right moment and lets the truth do the work. I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch until the sun went down. Somewhere in Pinewood Estates, Maria Cooper was probably rehearsing her speech, planning her victory. Counting votes, she thought she'd already won. She had no idea what was coming. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Maria Cooper's garage, transformed into a makeshift courtroom. Folding chairs in neat rows, a projector screen at the front, a podium with the Pinewood Estates HOA logo on a banner behind it. She'd even set up a sign-in table where her husband Kevin sat with a clipboard, checking names like this was a shareholders meeting. 23 people showed up. Most looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger who wandered into your family reunion, confused, suspicious, slightly hostile. Maria had been working the phones all week. Helen had warned me. She's telling everyone you're planning to sue the whole neighborhood, that property values will crash if you're not removed. Propaganda. And it was working. I sat in the back row, next to Helen. I had the folder with me, every document James had organized. But this wasn't the moment. Not yet. Not like this. Maria opened the meeting like a State of the Union address. Thank you all for coming. I know this is difficult, but we have a responsibility to protect our community from threats. She clicked to the first slide, a photograph of my cabin with a red circle around it, like a crime scene photo. This structure has been a source of concern. The owner has refused to engage with our requests, and recently, he's been seen conducting surveillance on our neighborhood, visiting the county recorder's office to access personal property records. A murmur went through the crowd. Eyes turned toward me. Helen put a hand on my arm. Stay calm. Maria clicked through more slides. Fabricated charts showing property value impact. Bullet points listing my violations. A photograph of me walking through the neighborhood, taken from someone's window. This individual is not a resident. He is not a member of our community, and he has made it clear he has no intention of complying with the standards we've all agreed to uphold. She paused. Today, I'm asking you to vote on a motion requiring full compliance within 60 days, or authorizing legal action to protect our community. Someone in the middle row raised a hand. Tom. That cabin's been there since before I moved in, before most of us moved in. How can we require someone to comply with rules that didn't exist when he built it? Good question. Maria's smile didn't waver. The HOA has authority to establish standards for the entire community. Past construction doesn't exempt anyone. We all adapt for the greater good. Tom didn't look convinced, but he sat back down. I watched Kevin. Maria's husband hadn't looked up once, shoulders hunched, hands clasped tight. When Maria mentioned legal action, he flinched, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. That man knew his wife had gone too far. He was terrified of what was coming. And in that moment, I understood something important. Maria Cooper wasn't just a bully. She was a bully whose own husband couldn't look her in the eye. Maria called for the vote. All in favor? 12 hands. Opposed? 8. Abstaining? 3. Maria beamed. The motion passes. Mr. Reed, you have 60 days to bring your property into compliance or demolish the non-conforming structure. Failure to do so will result in a lien and possible legal proceedings. Helen stood up. The whole room turned. You don't have that authority, she said, calm but firm. You can't place liens. You can't authorize legal action. This whole meeting is theater. Maria's smile turned cold. Mrs. Garcia, I'd be careful about whose side you choose. When this goes to court, we'll see who's telling the truth. The room went quiet. No one moved. Helen sat back down, but she didn't look away from Maria, not for a second. The meeting ended. People filed out, some glancing at me with curiosity, others avoiding eye contact. Kevin was gathering papers with shaking hands. He looked up, caught my eye, and for less than a second, something passed between us. Recognition, maybe apology. Then Maria called his name, and he hurried after her. Helen drove me back to the cabin. When we got there, she sat for a moment, staring at the trees. You're not going to let her win. It wasn't a question. I told her about the ground lease, about what James had found regarding Maria's past. Helen's eyes went wide. Then she started laughing, a genuine full-body laugh. That woman has been strutting around like she owns this place. And the whole time, she couldn't finish, just kept laughing. I called James that afternoon, told him about the meeting, the vote, the threats. He listened without interrupting. She's escalating, he said, predictable. People like her always escalate when they feel control slipping. He paused. What do you want to do? I told him I wanted a community meeting, a real one, not in Maria's garage, the community center. Everyone there, every resident who'd paid fees, every person who'd received threats. And Maria? James asked. I thought about Kevin's face, the fear in his eyes. Invite her too. Give her a front row seat. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of whiskey. 60 days, Maria had said. 60 days to comply. She had no idea that in less than 2 weeks, she'd be the one facing consequences. Not from me, from everyone she'd lied to. I didn't need 60 days. I just needed one meeting. I'm Michael Vincent, your storyteller today on Dear HOA. And if you were in this situation, knowing you owned everything but being threatened by someone who owned nothing, what would you do? Reveal the truth right there? Or wait for the perfect moment? Leave a comment below and let's see whose solution is the best. Thank you. 3 days after Maria's garage tribunal, Helen Garcia hosted a coffee meeting at her house. 5 neighbors, no agenda posted, no sign-in sheet, just a quiet invitation passed by word of mouth to people she trusted. People who'd looked uncomfortable during the vote, who'd asked questions Maria didn't want to answer, who'd been paying fees for 3 years without ever seeing a financial report. I came as a guest, not the host. This wasn't my meeting, it was theirs. Helen understood something I was still learning. If I stood at the front of the room telling people they'd been scammed, I'd look like an outsider with an agenda. But if they discovered it themselves, with each other, it would mean something different. It would mean everything. Helen's living room was small but comfortable. Floral couches, family photos on the walls, a coffee table covered with mugs and a plate of cookies that no one touched. Tom was there, the one who'd questioned Maria about the cabin's history. Sarah, a young mother who'd moved in 2 years ago. An older couple named Richard and May, who'd been in Pinewood Estates since the beginning. And a man named David, who worked from home, and had apparently been keeping notes on every interaction with Maria for 18 months. I knew something was off, David said, pulling out a folder thicker than mine. She charges $300 a month, but have any of you ever seen a budget? An expense report? Anything? Heads shook around the room. No one had. I asked a simple question. Do any of you have receipts for the HOA fees you've paid? Silence. Sarah spoke first. Maria said email confirmation was enough. She said the HOA was new, still setting up systems. Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. 3 years. 3 years of setting up systems. That's almost $11,000 I've paid. Where did it go? I pulled out a document James had prepared. A search result from the State Business Registry. Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association, I said. No registration, no tax ID, no official bank account anywhere in the state. I let that sink in. There's nowhere for your money to go except one place. Tom said something I'll never forget. He leaned back in his chair, stared at the ceiling and said, "We got conned by a professional Karen." And just like that, the room changed. It wasn't Arthur versus Maria anymore. It was the community versus a fraud. I watched it happen in real time. The way people looked at each other, the way shoulders relaxed and jaws tightened simultaneously. Anger, but also relief. The relief of realizing you're not crazy. You're not the only one who noticed. You're not alone. Helen looked at me. Tell them the rest. I hesitated. This was the part I'd been holding back. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I wasn't sure how they'd react. These people had bought homes here. They'd invested their savings, their futures. What I was about to tell them would change how they understood their own property. But they deserved to know. Everyone deserves to know what they actually own. I explained it as simply as I could. 15 years ago, I bought 47 acres of empty land. A developer approached me about building a residential community. Instead of selling, I agreed to a ground lease, 99 years. The developer built the houses, sold them, and dissolved his company. The homeowners owned their structures, their improvements, everything above ground. But the land itself never changed hands. The dirt under your feet, I said, is still mine. Every house in Pinewood Estates sits on leased ground. The room went very quiet. May's hand found Richard's. Sarah's eyes went wide. Tom just stared at me. "So we don't own our land?" Richard asked. His voice was steady, but I could hear the fear underneath. I shook my head. "You own your houses. The lease has 66 years left. Plenty of time. Your property values, your equity, your investment, none of that changes. The lease terms are fair. Your grandchildren could live in these homes. I paused. But here's what matters. Maria Cooper has been claiming authority over property she has no rights to. She's been collecting money for an organization that doesn't exist. And she's been threatening people, including me, with legal action she can't take. Helen leaned forward. And she's been doing this for 3 years? I nodded. That's not aggressive neighborhood management. That's fraud. David had been quiet, scribbling notes. Now he looked up. I have records of every payment I made, dates, amounts, and email confirmations. If this goes to court... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Sarah spoke next, her voice smaller than before. I voted against you at that meeting. I believed what Maria said about you being a threat. She looked at me directly. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I shook my head. You don't owe me an apology. You were lied to. We all get fooled by people who act like they have authority they don't have. The question isn't who believed her. The question is what we do now. Tom stood up. He'd been restless since the ground lease revelation, pacing by the window, running his hands through his hair. We need a real meeting, he said. Not in Maria's garage, somewhere neutral, the community center. Everyone invited. Everyone who's paid fees. Everyone who's gotten those threatening letters. He looked at me. Can you bring your lawyer? I nodded. And the documents? I nodded again. Then let's do it. Next Wednesday, 7 p.m. I'll book the space. Helen smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from anyone in that room. And this time, she said, Maria doesn't get to run the show. The next 4 days were a blur of phone calls, photocopies, and careful planning. David created a spreadsheet of every fee payment he could verify. Nearly $30,000 over 3 years, from 8 households alone. Tom talked to neighbors who hadn't been at Helen's meeting, gauging interest without revealing too much. Sarah, despite her initial hesitation, turned out to be the most effective recruiter. I just tell them I have questions about the HOA finances, she said. Everyone has questions. They've just been too scared to ask. By Tuesday night, we had 15 confirmed attendees for the community meeting. By Wednesday morning, that number had grown to 28. Maria found out, of course. She posted on the neighborhood social media group at 6 a.m. Wednesday. Attention residents. An unauthorized meeting has been scheduled at the community center tonight. This meeting is not sanctioned by the HOA board. Attendance is discouraged. Anyone who participates may be subject to review for violations of community standards. Classic Maria. When you can't control the narrative, try to control the audience. But this time, something was different. Within an hour, her post had 12 comments, and not one of them was supportive. What community standards? Someone wrote. The ones you made up? Another. I've been paying fees for 2 years and never seen a financial statement. I'll be there tonight. And another, from a name I didn't recognize. My wife and I are tired of being threatened. We'll be there. I drove past Maria's house that afternoon, not to confront her, just to see. The curtains were drawn, both cars in the driveway, no one outside. For 3 years, Maria Cooper had been the loudest voice in Pinewood Estates, the self-appointed queen of a kingdom she invented. And now, for the first time, she was hiding, waiting, wondering what was coming. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the fake lawyer letters, the lien threats, the police at my cabin, the sleepless nights, and the feeling passed. Helen called me at 5 p.m. 32 people confirmed, she said, and Maria just RSVP'd. She's bringing her husband and someone she described as legal counsel. I smiled. Let her bring whoever she wanted. Let her bring an army. It wouldn't change what was about to happen. Good, I said. I want her there. I want her to see it all fall apart. That evening, loading documents into my truck, I realized something. This wasn't about winning anymore. It wasn't even about Maria. It was about 32 people who deserved to know the truth about where they lived and who had been lying to them. It was about a community that had been divided by fear and manipulation, getting the chance to see clearly for the first time. Whatever happened tonight, whether Maria fought back, apologized, or ran, the outcome that mattered most had already been achieved. People were asking questions. People were standing together. And Maria Cooper, for all her bluster and threats, couldn't stop that. No one can stop the truth once enough people start looking for it. Wednesday evening, 7 p.m., the Pinewood Community Center, a beige building with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs that squeaked against the linoleum floor. 35 people showed up, more than I'd expected, more than Maria expected too, based on the expression on her face when she walked in and saw the room nearly full. She'd brought reinforcements. Kevin, looking like a man heading to his own execution, and a real lawyer this time, a tall man in a gray suit with an actual state bar license. His name was Thompson. I'd checked. Helen had saved 2 seats in the front row, one for me, one for James Rogers. James had brought a red folder. Inside was everything: the ground lease, the plat maps, the deed transfers, the fake lawyer letter, and Maria's Nevada complaint file. 15 years of documentation, organized and ready. Maria tried to take control immediately. She walked to the front of the room before anyone else could speak, positioning herself behind the small podium someone had set up. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she said, her voice carrying that practiced authority I'd grown to recognize. "I understand there's been some confusion about HOA procedures and finances. My attorney, Mr. Thompson, is here to address any concerns and clarify the legal standing of our organization." Thompson stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. I almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea what he'd walked into. Thompson cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Cooper. I've reviewed the documentation for the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association, and I want to assure everyone that—" James stood up. The room went quiet. "Mr. Thompson," James said, his voice calm and measured, "before you continue, I'd like to share some documents with you, as a professional courtesy." He walked to the front, opened the red folder, and handed Thompson a stack of papers. I watched Thompson's face as he read. First confusion, then concern, then something close to horror. "Remember those emails Maria sent me? The ones threatening legal action, demanding compliance, warning of liens and lawsuits. I'd saved every single one, printed them out. And right there, in the middle of the stack James handed over, was the letter from Cooper and Associates, attorneys at law. The fake law firm Maria had invented, the fake lawyer she'd impersonated. Thompson read it twice. Then he looked at Maria with an expression I'll never forget. "Mrs. Cooper," he said slowly, "this letterhead claims to be from a law firm called Cooper and Associates. Did you write this?" Maria's face went pale. "That's not relevant to tonight's discussion. We're here to talk about the cabin situation and—" "Mrs. Cooper," Thompson's voice had changed, harder now. "Impersonating an attorney is a felony in this state. Did you write this letter?" The room was dead silent. 35 people were watching Maria Cooper try to find words that wouldn't come. Thompson set down the papers. "I need a moment to speak with my client privately." But James wasn't finished. He turned to face the room, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner. "My name is James Rogers. I'm a real estate attorney representing Arthur Reed, the man Mrs. Cooper has been calling a squatter, a trespasser, and a threat to your community." He opened the red folder again. "I have here the original plat map for this area, recorded in 1962. I have the ground lease agreement signed in 2009 between Arthur Reed and Westbrook Properties, the developer who built Pinewood Estates. And I have the deed transfer from 2009, showing Mr. Reed's ownership of 47 acres of land." He paused. "All 47 acres." You could have heard a pin drop. James continued. "When Westbrook Properties built this neighborhood, they didn't buy the land. They leased it. 99 years. The homes you purchased, you own them. The structures, the improvements, everything above ground. But the land beneath your homes is leased property." He looked directly at Maria. "Leased from my client, the man you've been harassing for the past 2 months, the man whose cabin sits on land he's owned for 15 years, the man you called the police on for trespassing on his own property." I watched Maria's face. For 3 months she'd treated me like an intruder, like someone who didn't belong. She'd sent fake legal threats, called the police, posted warnings on social media, organized a vote to force me out. And the whole time, she was living on my land. Her house, her garage courtroom, her podium with the fake HOA logo, all of it sitting on dirt that I bought and paid for before she ever heard of Pinewood Estates. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Behind her, Kevin had his head in his hands. James wasn't done. He pulled out one final document, the master copy of the ground lease, with clause 7.3 highlighted in yellow. Section 7, paragraph 3, he read aloud. The landowner reserves the right to terminate any lease agreement if the lessee or any resident engages in conduct that materially interferes with the landowner's use and enjoyment of the property, including harassment, obstruction of access, filing of false claims, or misrepresentation of ownership rights. He looked at Maria. Mrs. Cooper has done all four. My client has grounds to terminate her lease immediately. She would have 30 days to vacate. A gasp from somewhere in the back. Tom stood up. Wait, you could kick her out, just like that. I stood up for the first time. The room turned to face me. I could, I said, but that's not why I'm here. I walked to the front, standing next to James. I'm not here to evict anyone. I'm not here to threaten your homes or your families. I'm here because you deserve the truth. I looked at Maria, then at the crowd. This woman has been collecting money from you for 3 years. Money for an HOA that doesn't legally exist. Money that went into her personal account, not a community fund. She's sent threatening letters impersonating attorneys. She's filed false reports with the police. And she's done it all while living on property she has no special claim to. I paused. What you do with that information is your decision, not mine. The room erupted. Not chaos, something more controlled. Questions, demands. David stood up with his folder of payment records. Sarah asked about refunds. Tom wanted to know about filing charges. And through it all, Maria stood frozen at the podium, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear, her husband still staring at the floor. Then Kevin stood up. The whole room went quiet. He looked at his wife for a long moment, and then he looked at me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracked. I knew what she was doing. I should have stopped it. I should have said something months ago. He took a breath. We'll pay back every dollar, every fee she collected, and we're going to sell the house. We're leaving. Maria grabbed his arm. Kevin, what are you? But he pulled away, didn't look at her. Just walked toward the exit, shoulders shaking. Maria watched him go. For the first time since I'd met her, she had nothing to say. The meeting ended with 3 decisions, voted on unanimously. First, Maria Cooper would refund every dollar collected as HOA fees, nearly $30,000 total. Second, the community would file a formal complaint with the district attorney's office regarding fraud and attorney impersonation. Third, I agreed not to invoke clause 7.3, provided Maria and Kevin vacated within 90 days. No eviction, no drama, just consequences. As people filed out, Helen found me by the door. She didn't say anything, just squeezed my hand once and smiled. That was enough. 6 months later, I was back at the cabin. Same porch, same coffee, same view of pine trees stretching toward the horizon. But everything else had changed. The fence I'd been repairing that September morning, the day the police showed up, was finally finished. New posts, fresh stain, solid enough to last another 20 years. I sat there watching the sun come up, thinking about how strange life can be. How a woman I'd never met could declare war on me over a cabin that had been standing since before she knew this place existed. And how that war had ended, not with lawyers and courtrooms, but with a community finally seeing the truth. Maria Cooper pleaded guilty to 2 charges, wire fraud and criminal impersonation of an attorney. The federal prosecutor had wanted more, mail fraud, filing false documents, harassment. But the plea deal was faster and cleaner. She got 3 years probation, no jail time, but a felony on her record that would follow her forever. She was ordered to pay restitution, $32,400, distributed among the 8 families who'd been paying her fake HOA fees. And she was banned, permanently banned, from serving in any HOA leadership position in the state. For someone who'd built her entire identity around controlling a neighborhood, that last part might have been the harshest punishment of all. The Coopers sold their house in 47 days, below the asking price, but they didn't negotiate. Kevin handled everything, the listing, the showings, the closing. Maria never appeared in public again after that community meeting. Helen told me she'd seen her once, loading boxes into a moving truck at 6 in the morning, like she was fleeing a crime scene. Maybe she was. The new owners were a young couple with a baby. They introduced themselves to me the first weekend they moved in. "We heard about what happened," the husband said. "The whole neighborhood talks about it." He shook my hand. "Thank you for not letting her win." I didn't correct him. But the truth is, I didn't beat Maria Cooper. She beat herself. Every lie she told, every threat she made, every line she crossed, those were her choices. All I did was wait for the evidence to accumulate, wait for the community to start asking questions, wait for the right moment to let the truth speak for itself. My father used to say that patience isn't passive, it's strategic. I never understood what he meant until now. Pinewood Estates voted, unanimously, not to form an official HOA. After everything Maria had done in the name of community standards, the last thing anyone wanted was another organization with property. Instead, they created something simpler, a voluntary neighborhood association. No fees, no fines, no architectural review boards. Just a group of neighbors who meet once a month to plan block parties, coordinate yard sales, and look out for each other. Helen Garcia agreed to be the coordinator. She refused any title fancier than that. "The moment someone calls me president," she said, "I'm retiring." The first neighborhood barbecue happened in April. Someone set up tables in the community center parking lot. Tom brought a grill the size of a small car. Sarah made 3 different kinds of potato salad. David, the one who'd kept 18 months of payment records, showed up with his wife and twin daughters, who immediately started a water balloon fight with the other kids. I wasn't planning to go. It felt strange, being invited to a party in a neighborhood where I didn't technically live. But Helen insisted. "You're part of this community now," she said, "whether you like it or not." I showed up late, carrying a case of beer and feeling out of place. But the moment I walked in, Tom waved me over. Sarah handed me a plate. Richard and May, the older couple from Helen's original coffee meeting, saved me a seat at their table. And for the next 3 hours, I sat there, eating barbecue, and listening to stories and laughing at jokes from people I'd known for less than a year. People who, 6 months ago, had voted to force me out of my own property. People who'd believed Maria's lies, because it was easier than asking questions. People who'd since apologized, one by one, in their own ways. That's the thing about communities. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. They follow the wrong leaders. But when they finally see the truth, when they choose to stand together instead of turning on each other, they become something stronger than any one person could break. Last month, a kid knocked on my cabin door. 8 years old, maybe 9. Messy hair, dirt on his knees. He lived 3 streets over. I'd seen him at the barbecue, chasing water balloons. "Are you the man who owns all the land?" he asked. I thought about how to answer that. Technically, yes. Legally, yes. But it felt like the wrong way to put it. "I own this cabin," I said, "and the trees around it. That's about it." He looked at the cabin, then back at me. "My mom says you saved the neighborhood from a bad lady." I laughed. "Your mom's being generous. I just waited and paid attention and didn't let someone take what wasn't theirs." He thought about that for a second. Then, "Cool, can I see inside?" I showed him the porch, the wood stove, the rocking chair my father had built 30 years ago. He asked if I'd built the cabin myself. I told him yes. He asked if it was hard. I told him everything worth doing is hard. He left with a handful of cookies and a promise to come back sometime. Watching him run down the dirt path toward the main road, I thought about what Helen had said. "You're part of this community now." Maybe she was right. Not because I owned the land. That was just paperwork. But because I'd stood up when it mattered. Because I'd chosen patience over revenge. Because I'd let the truth do the work, instead of trying to force a victory. That's what communities are built on. Not perfect people, not perfect decisions, just ordinary people choosing, again and again, to do the right thing when it would be easier not to. I still come out to the cabin every weekend. The coffee's still good. The silence still feels like a gift. And nobody calls the police anymore. If you're dealing with your own HOA nightmare, your own Maria Cooper, I want to leave you with this. Document everything. Every email, every letter, every conversation. Know your rights. Read your CC and Rs. Check if your HOA is actually registered with the state. Find allies. You're never the only one who sees the truth. And most importantly, be patient. People who abuse power always overreach. Always. Your job isn't to destroy them. Your job is to stand firm long enough for them to destroy themselves. The sun's going down now. The pines are turning gold. Somewhere in Pinewood Estates, Helen is probably organizing next month's potluck. Tom is probably arguing about football. Sarah's kids are probably making a mess that someone will have to clean up. And Maria Cooper? She's somewhere else. Someone else's problem. Or maybe, just maybe, she learned something. I doubt it, but I hope so. Because the thing about second chances is, they only work if you're willing to see what you did wrong the first time. Thanks for sticking with this story to the end. I'm Michael Vincent, and this has been Dear HOA. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe. There are plenty more where this came from. And if you've got your own story about HOA justice, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time.